The cracks in the eggshell spread like tiny lightning bolts across the mottled green surface. Amara Reeves held her breath, eyes fixed on the hairline fractures as they multiplied. After 3 days of watching over the abandoned egg, maintaining precise temperature and humidity levels within her makeshift incubator, something was finally happening. "Come on, little one," she whispered, careful not to disturb the other medical supplies stacked in the small storage room at the back of the Interstellar Medical Outpost 47. This remote outpost on Draconia, a frontier world on the edge of human space, wasn't equipped for hatching dragon eggs. It was barely equipped for treating the 100 or so human colonists scattered across the planet's northern continent. But when a terrified local child had brought her the abandoned egg, cold and nearly lifeless, Amara couldn't turn it away. Another crack appeared, larger this time, and a small claw poked through, glistening with fluid. Amara's heart raced. According to everything she'd read, and she'd spent every free moment researching since the egg arrived, this was a miracle. Wild dragon hatchlings had less than a 5% survival rate when abandoned. The reptilian species that dominated Draconia's ecosystem were notoriously difficult to raise, even by their own kind. The dragonling inside the egg chirped, a sound somewhere between a bird and a lizard, as it struggled against its confines. Another push, and a tiny, serpentine head broke through, membrane-covered eyes still sealed shut. Its scales gleamed an iridescent blue-green under the incubator's warming lights. "That's it," Amara encouraged, reaching for the specially prepared formula she'd concocted based on her research. "Just a little more." The hatchling gave one final push, and the egg split open completely. The tiny creature tumbled out onto the soft padding Amara had prepared, its wings still folded and damp against its slender body. It was no larger than a house cat, though its tail added another foot to its length. The dragonling mewed weakly, still blind and vulnerable. Amara carefully lifted the heating pad's temperature and reached for a sterilized cloth. With gentle motions, she began clearing the membrane from the hatchling's eyes and nostrils, just as she would for any newborn. The creature sniffed the air, catching her scent, and turned its head toward her fingers. "Hungry, aren't you?" she said softly, reaching for the formula. "Let's get some nutrition in you first, then we'll." The door to the storage room burst open. Startled, Amara nearly dropped the feeding syringe. Standing in the doorway was Administrator Thorne, his typically stern face now twisted with shock and anger. Behind him stood 2 Draconian officials, their tall, reptilian forms towering over the human administrator. "Nurse Reeves," Thorne said, his voice dangerously low. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Before Amara could respond, one of the Draconians pushed forward. Governor Silex, she recognized, the regional authority who rarely bothered with the human outpost. His scales were a deep crimson, signifying his high rank, and the ornate gold bands around his forearms marked him as a government official. "This is an outrage," Silex hissed, yellow eyes fixed on the hatchling. "A direct violation of the interspecies accord and Draconian sovereignty." Amara instinctively moved to shield the dragonling, which was now making distressed sounds at the sudden commotion. "I don't understand." This hatchling was abandoned. It would have died without intervention. The second Draconian, wearing the insignia of their scientific division, stepped forward. "That is precisely the point, human. It was abandoned because it is defective. The clutch mother determined it unworthy of survival." She pointed a clawed finger at the hatchling's left wing, which Amara now noticed had a slight deformity, a kink in the main supporting bone. "You've interfered with natural selection," the scientist continued. "Worse, you've done so without any authorization from Draconian authorities." Administrator Thorne cleared his throat. "Nurse Reeves, were you aware that under Draconian law, the handling of any native species, particularly dragons, requires explicit permission from their biological management division?" Amara felt her stomach sink. "I was aware there were regulations, but this was an emergency situation. The egg was brought to me half-frozen. There wasn't time to file paperwork." "You should have contacted us immediately," Silex said, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Instead, you took it upon yourself to preserve a genetic line that nature had selected for termination." "It's a baby," Amara said firmly. "Genetic line or not, it deserves a chance at life." The room fell silent except for the soft whimpering of the hatchling, which was now pressing itself against Amara's hand, seeking warmth and reassurance. Administrator Thorne looked deeply uncomfortable. Governor Silex, surely there's some accommodation we can reach here. Nurse Reeves acted out of compassion, which is a highly valued trait in human medical professionals. Compassion? Silex spat the word as if it tasted foul. Your human sentimentality has no place in draconian evolutionary processes. This specimen must be terminated immediately, and appropriate sanctions must be applied. The word terminated sent a chill through Amara's body. No, she said, the word escaping before she could consider its implications. I won't allow that. All eyes turned to her. The tension in the room thickened to an almost unbearable degree. You are in no position to allow or disallow anything human, the draconian scientist said coldly. This facility exists on our world by our permission. The regulations are clear. Administrator Thorne placed a restraining hand on Amara's shoulder. Nurse Reeves, I understand your feelings, but we must respect draconian law. Hand over the hatchling. Amara looked down at the tiny creature. It had managed to open its eyes, brilliant amber orbs that gazed up at her with complete trust. In that moment, she knew she could no more surrender this innocent life than she could stop breathing. With all due respect, Administrator, I took an oath to preserve life. Not just human life, all life. She straightened her spine, meeting the governor's yellow glare. I request a formal hearing before any action is taken against this hatchling. Silex's scales flushed a deeper red. You have no standing to request anything. The matter is decided. He turned to the scientist. Prepare a containment unit. We will remove the aberration immediately. The scientist moved toward a nearby supply cabinet, presumably searching for something to transport the hatchling. Amara tightened her hold on the dragonling, which responded by curling its tail around her wrist. Stop, came a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Elena Chun, the outpost's chief medical officer and Amara's supervisor, stood there, tablet in hand. Governor Silex, under Article 7 of the Human Draconian Treaty, any dispute involving potential ethical conflicts between our species must undergo a formal review process before action is taken. Silex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme irritation. This is not an ethical conflict, Doctor. It is a simple matter of law enforcement. I disagree, Dr. Chin said calmly, stepping into the room. Nurse Reeves acted according to human medical ethics. This creates precisely the kind of cross-cultural dispute that Article 7 was designed to address. Furthermore, she held up her tablet, displaying a document. I've just filed an emergency petition with both the Human Colonial Authority and the Draconian High Council. Amara felt a surge of gratitude toward her superior. Dr. Chun had always been fair-minded and pragmatic, but this level of support was unexpected. Administrator Thorne examined the tablet, his expression shifting from concern to cautious relief. The petition appears to be in order. Governor, I suggest we adjourn to discuss this development. Silex's eyes narrowed to slits. This changes nothing. It merely delays the inevitable. He jabbed a clawed finger toward Amara. The hatchling remains confiscated, and this human will face consequences for her actions. The hatchling will remain in our medical facility under observation until the review process is complete, Dr. Chin countered. As for Nurse Reeves, any disciplinary action will also wait for official determination. For a tense moment, it seemed Silex might physically challenge the humans. Instead, he drew himself up to his full height, nearly 7 feet of irritated reptilian official. You have 24 hours to prepare your case. Not 1 minute more. The review panel will convene tomorrow at midday. With that, he turned and stalked out, the scientist following close behind. Administrator Thorne lingered, looking between Amara and Dr. Chun with a mixture of exasperation and concern. I hope you both understand what you've done, he said quietly. Governor Silex has considerable influence with the High Council. This won't end well. We're doing what's right, Amara said, gently stroking the hatchling's head as it began to doze off, exhausted from the hatching process. Thorne sighed. Right by whose standards? That's exactly the question at hand. He shook his head. I'll do what I can to smooth things over, but prepare yourselves. Tomorrow will not be pleasant. After he left, Dr. Chin approached the incubator, examining the dragonling with professional interest. Impressive work, Amara. From what I can see, this little one is remarkably healthy, considering the circumstances. Except for the wing. Amara said, pointing out the slight deformity. That's why it was abandoned. Dr. Chen frowned. A minor developmental issue. With proper care during growth, that might even correct itself. She met Amara's eyes. You realize this could cost you your position here, possibly even your medical license if the colonial authority sides with the Draconians. Amara nodded, her throat tight. I know, but I couldn't just let them kill it. Not when I could help. Your compassion does you credit, Dr. Chen said, placing a hand on her shoulder. But we'll need more than compassion to win tomorrow. We need facts, precedents, anything that might sway the review panel. She glanced at her tablet. I'll research similar cases. You focus on documenting everything about this hatchling's condition and care. What about the wing deformity? They'll use that against us. Dr. Chun considered the sleeping dragonling. Document it thoroughly, yes, but also note any other characteristics. If there's anything special or advantageous about this particular hatchling, we need to know. The Draconians value strength and evolutionary advantage above all else. We need to speak their language. Through the night, Amara worked tirelessly, feeding the hatchling at regular intervals and documenting every observation. The tiny dragon proved remarkably responsive, already recognizing her voice and scent. Its wing deformity didn't seem to cause pain, and its other limbs functioned perfectly. Most surprising was its rate of development. By morning, it had already grown several inches and showed signs of advanced cognitive awareness. When Dr. Chun returned at dawn, Amara had compiled a comprehensive report. There's something unusual about this hatchling, she explained, showing her supervisor the data. Its neurological responses are off the charts compared to standard baselines for newborn dragons. Interesting, Dr. Chun murmured, reviewing the findings. This could suggest enhanced intelligence or sensory capabilities, potentially beneficial traits that might offset the physical imperfection. Exactly what I was thinking, Amara said, hope rising in her chest. Could this be enough to convince them? Dr. Chin's expression remained guarded. It's a strong argument, but Draconian culture places enormous emphasis on physical perfection in their ruling caste. Still, it's our best angle. She checked the time. The hearing begins in 3 hours. Get some rest if you can, Amara. I'll make the final preparations. Rest proved impossible. Amara remained with the hatchling, which she'd begun to think of as azure due to the blue tint of its scales. It was now actively exploring its enclosure, testing its limbs, and occasionally attempting to flap its wings. The deformed wing didn't extend fully, but Azure seemed to be adapting, using its tail for additional balance. As the appointed hour approached, Amara carefully placed Azure in a specialized carrier she'd modified for medical equipment. The hatchling chirped inquisitively but settled down when she stroked its head. Whatever happens, she whispered, I'll fight for you. The hearing was to be held in the outpost's main conference room, the only space large enough to accommodate both human and Draconian officials. When Amara arrived with Dr. Chen, she found the room already crowded. Administrator Thorne sat at one end of the long table, looking uncomfortable in formal attire. Opposite him sat Governor Silex and 3 other high-ranking Draconians, their scales polished to a gleaming finish for the occasion. Between these opposing forces sat a single figure, a mediator from the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps, specially dispatched for situations exactly like this. Mediator Patel was a slight, serious-looking woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, suggesting years of experience navigating interspecies conflicts. Nurse Reeves, she acknowledged as Amara entered. And the subject of our deliberations, I presume. She nodded toward the carrier. Yes, mediator, Amara confirmed, placing the carrier on a designated table. This is the hatchling in question. Silex hissed softly. The aberration should not be present during these proceedings. On the contrary, Mediator Patel said firmly, the physical evidence is central to this case. The hatchling stays. She gestured to the empty seats. Please be seated. We will begin. What followed was the most grueling 3 hours of Amara's life. The Draconian officials presented their case first, outlining in painstaking detail the laws Amara had violated and the evolutionary principles she had undermined. The scientist from the day before, introduced as Specialist Vex, presented disturbing visuals of what happened to dragons with genetic weaknesses when allowed to mature, images of malformed adults suffering from multiple health complications. Natural selection exists for a reason, Vex concluded. By interfering, the human has potentially condemned this specimen to a life of suffering, while simultaneously weakening our species' genetic pool. When it was the humans' turn, Dr. Chen presented their findings on Azure's exceptional neurological development, arguing that the wing deformity might be balanced by enhanced intelligence, a trade-off seen in evolutionary processes across many species. Furthermore, she added, the Treaty of Mutual Respect signed by both our peoples explicitly recognizes the validity of different cultural approaches to ethical questions. Nurse Reeves acted in accordance with human medical ethics, which prioritized the preservation of individual life. Throughout it all, Azure remained surprisingly calm in its carrier, occasionally chirping or shifting position but showing none of the distress Amara had feared. Several times, she noticed the mediator studying the hatchling with thoughtful interest. Finally, after all arguments had been presented, Mediator Patel addressed the room. This case presents a genuine conflict between two valid cultural perspectives. The Draconians' emphasis on species strength through natural selection versus the human prioritization of individual life and potential. Before I render judgment, I would like to examine the hatchling myself. Amara carefully opened the carrier. Azure immediately peered out, amber eyes alert and curious. When Amara offered her hand, the hatchling climbed onto it without hesitation, balancing with its tail. Mediator Patel approached slowly. Remarkable bonding for such a young specimen, she observed. The hatchling has imprinted on her, Vex said dismissively. A common biological error when species are exposed to inappropriate caretakers during critical development periods. The mediator extended her hand toward Azure. The dragonling sniffed it cautiously, then, to everyone's surprise, extended its neck to touch its snout to her fingers, a greeting gesture typical of mature dragons. Unusual behavior for a newborn, Patel noted. May I? She asked Amara, indicating she wanted to hold Azure. With some trepidation, Amara transferred the hatchling. Azure remained calm, studying the mediator with those intelligent eyes. The wing deformity, Patel said, gently extending the limb in question. Is it causing pain? No evidence of pain responses in any of our examinations, Dr. Chen answered. The structural issue appears to be limited to the extension capability, not nerve function. Mediator Patel returned Azure to Amara, then took her seat again, her expression contemplative. I have heard the arguments from both sides, and I have examined the evidence. This is a complex case with valid points on each side. The room grew tense as everyone awaited her decision. However, she continued, I must consider not only the legal frameworks, but also the broader implications for interspecies relations. The draconian legal position is technically correct. Nurse Reeves did violate protocols for handling native species. Amara's heart sank as Silex's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. But, Patel held up a hand. The human ethical position also has validity. The hatchling shows signs of unusual development that might indeed compensate for its physical limitation. She took a deep breath. My ruling is as follows. The violation of protocol will be noted and a formal reprimand issued to Nurse Reeves and Outpost 47. However, the hatchling will not be terminated. A murmur ran through the room. Silex rose halfway from his seat, scales flushing with anger, but Patel continued before he could speak. Instead, I propose a compromise. The hatchling will be transferred to a draconian scientific facility for further study of its neurological development. If evidence of advantageous traits is confirmed, it will be permitted to live under controlled conditions. If not, the matter will be reconsidered. This is unacceptable, Silex declared. The ruling undermines draconian sovereignty and evolutionary principles. And killing the hatchling undermines human medical ethics and compassionate principles, Patel countered. This is the essence of compromise, Governor. Neither side gets exactly what they want. Amara looked down at Azure, who had curled up in her arms, trusting and vulnerable. The thought of surrendering the hatchling to a cold scientific facility filled her with dread. Mediator, may I speak? Patel nodded. The hatchling has formed a bond with me. Separating us now could negatively impact its development. I request permission to accompany it to the facility as its primary caretaker. Silex laughed, a harsh, hissing sound. Absurd. Our facilities are not designed to accommodate humans. Actually, Dr. Chun interjected. Under Section 12 of the Interspecies Research Accord, collaborative studies involving multiple species must provide appropriate accommodations for all participating researchers. If Nurse Reeves is officially designated as a research partner in this case, the facility would be required to accommodate her. Mediator Patel raised an eyebrow, impressed by the quick thinking. A valid point, Doctor. Governor Silex, would you accept this arrangement as part of the compromise? The draconian governor's tail lashed in agitation. This grows more outrageous by the moment. The human has no qualifications in draconic biology. I've spent the past 3 days studying nothing but draconic biology, Amara countered. And I have medical training that would be valuable to the research. For a long moment, Silex glared at her, yellow eyes unblinking. Then, with obvious reluctance, he inclined his head. 3 days. The human may remain with the specimen for 3 days during the transition period. After that, our scientists will take full control. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Amara nodded her acceptance. Then the matter is settled, Mediator Patel declared. The formal transfer will take place tomorrow morning. Nurse Reeves will continue as caretaker tonight and accompany the hatchling for the initial transition period. A full report on the specimen's development will be shared with Outpost 47 as a professional courtesy. As the meeting disbanded, Amara clutched Azure a little tighter. The hatchling had fallen asleep despite the tension-filled room, its trust in her complete. 3 days wasn't much time, but perhaps it would be enough to convince the draconian scientists of Azure's value. And if not, she pushed the thought away. One battle at a time. Back in the medical storage room, now officially designated as a temporary nursery, Amara updated Azure's feeding formula based on its rapid growth. Dr. Chen joined her as evening approached. You fought well today, the doctor said, helping to adjust the incubator settings. We still lost, Amara replied softly. 3 days, then I never see Azure again. Dr. Chun gave her a measured look. Perhaps, or perhaps in 3 days, you'll have demonstrated your value to their research so effectively they'll extend your stay. She placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. Don't underestimate yourself, Nurse Reeves. What you've accomplished with this hatchling is remarkable. After Dr. Chen left, Amara spent the night preparing detailed care instructions and organizing her research notes. If she only had 3 days, she would make them count. Azure continued to show extraordinary development, now attempting to vocalize beyond simple chirps, producing sounds that almost resembled draconian speech patterns. Morning came too quickly. Amara had just finished feeding Azure when Administrator Thorne appeared at the door, his expression grave. They're here, he said simply. Amara nodded, gathering her prepared materials and the carrier containing Azure. I'm ready. But as they stepped into the outpost's main hallway, they were met not by the expected draconian scientists, but by a squad of uniformed security forces, scales gleaming beneath tactical armor. What's happening? Amara asked, instinctively pulling Azure's carrier closer. Thorne looked equally confused. I don't know. This isn't the scientific team we were expecting. The lead security officer stepped forward, addressing Thorne. By order of Governor Silex, the aberrant specimen is to be confiscated immediately for immediate termination. The compromise arrangement has been overruled by the High Council. That's impossible, Thorne protested. Mediator Patel's ruling was binding under interspecies law. The High Council has determined this to be a matter of planetary security, outside the mediator's jurisdiction, the officer replied coldly. He extended a clawed hand toward Amara. Surrender the specimen, human. Amara backed away, heart pounding. No, this contradicts everything that was agreed upon yesterday. I demand to speak with Mediator Patel. The mediator departed our world this morning. There will be no further discussion. The officer signaled, and his squad moved to surround Amara. Administrator Thorne stepped between them. This is a violation of diplomatic protocol. I must insist that you. The officer casually shoved Thorne aside with enough force to send the administrator stumbling against the wall. Last warning, human. Surrender the specimen or face severe consequences. Trapped and outnumbered, Amara felt despair washing over her. After everything, it would end like this, with deception and force. She looked down at Azure, who gazed back with those intelligent eyes, seemingly aware of the danger. And then, without warning, the outpost's emergency alarm began to blare. The high-pitched wail of the alarm disoriented everyone for a crucial moment. Amara clutched Azure's carrier tighter as the Draconian security forces glanced around in confusion. The lead officer recovered first, barking orders to his subordinates. Ignore the alarm. Secure the specimen. But before anyone could move, Dr. Chen's voice came over the outpost's communication system. Attention, all personnel. Multiple unidentified vessels have entered Draconia's atmosphere. All staff report to emergency stations immediately. The security team's communication devices buzzed simultaneously. The lead officer listened to his earpiece, mandibles clicking in agitation. Impossible, he hissed. Taking advantage of the distraction, Administrator Thorne pushed himself away from the wall and moved to Amara's side. We need to go? Now. Without waiting for a response, he guided her down a side corridor, away from the security team. Behind them, the lead officer shouted orders, but the confusion of the alarm and the apparent crisis unfolding outside worked in their favor. What's happening? Amara asked as they hurried through the twisting hallways of the outpost. I have no idea, Thorne admitted. But whatever it is, it's significant enough to panic their military channels. He tapped his wrist device. Dr. Chun, what's our status? The doctor's voice came through, tinny but clear. Make your way to the east observation deck. You need to see this. Following her instructions, they navigated through the increasingly chaotic outpost. Human staff members rushed to their emergency positions while alarms continued to blare. Azure, remarkably, remained calm in the carrier, those intelligent eyes taking in everything. When they reached the observation deck, they found Dr. Chun standing before the massive viewports, her expression one of stunned disbelief. Outside, the clear blue sky of Draconia was filled with ships, hundreds of them, ranging from small, sleek vessels to massive carriers that blotted out the sun as they descended. What are we looking at? Thorne asked, his voice barely audible above the alarms. Dr. Chun shook her head. I don't know. They're not human vessels, and they don't match any Draconian configurations in our database. As they watched, the largest of the ships settled into a hovering position directly above the capital city, about 20 miles from the outpost. Smaller vessels deployed from its hangar bays, forming a protective perimeter. Amara's attention was drawn to Azure, who had become unusually animated. The hatchling pressed against the carrier's viewing panel, eyes fixed on the ships outside, making a series of complex vocalizations unlike anything she'd heard before. It recognizes them, she whispered. Before anyone could respond, their wrist devices simultaneously chimed with an incoming transmission, a general broadcast being sent to all communication systems on the planet. Citizens of Draconia, a deep, resonant voice began, speaking flawless standard, the common language used across human and Draconian territories. I am Admiral Zorn of the Draconis Imperium. We have come in response to a distress signal from one of our own. Thorne's eyes widened. Draconis Imperium? What the hell is that? Dr. Chin was already accessing the outpost's database. There's nothing in our records about any Draconis Imperium. Either this is an elaborate hoax, or we're dealing with something completely unknown. Thorne finished grimly. The broadcast continued. We demand immediate contact with the human designated as Amara Reeves and the surrender of all parties responsible for the unjust proceedings against her and the royal hatchling under her protection. The three humans exchanged stunned glances. Royal hatchling? Amara looked down at Azure, who was now making what almost sounded like purring noises. That's not possible. Azure was abandoned, defective. A new alert sounded on their devices, a direct communication request from the lead vessel. With trembling fingers, Dr. Chin accepted it, and a holographic image materialized before them. The dragon that appeared was unlike any Draconian they had ever seen. Where the native Draconians were bipedal reptilians of humanoid proportion, this being was a true dragon in the classical sense. Massive, serpentine, with an elongated neck and powerful wings folded against its sides. Its scales were a deep sapphire blue with golden markings, and its eyes held an intelligence that made even Azure's precocious gaze seem primitive by comparison. Nurse Amara Reeves, the dragon said, confirming that this was indeed Admiral Zorn. Is the royal hatchling safe? Finding her voice with difficulty, Amara nodded. Yes, I have Azure right here, but I don't understand. What is the Draconis Imperium? And what do you mean by royal hatchling? The Admiral's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but his voice softened slightly. The one you call Azure is Azurath, heir to the imperial throne of the Draconis Imperium. The egg was stolen during a diplomatic mission to this world 6 months ago, then deliberately damaged and abandoned by those who wished to prevent the succession. Amara's mind reeled with the implications. But the Draconians said Azurath was abandoned because of a genetic defect. A convenient lie, Zorn rumbled. The wing was damaged in an attempt to ensure the hatchling would not survive. Had you not intervened, Nurse Reeves, the Imperial line would have been broken for the first time in 10,000 years. Before anyone could respond further, the observation deck doors slid open. Governor Silex entered, flanked by a dozen heavily armed security officers. His scales were flushed almost black with rage or fear, possibly both. "What have you done?" he demanded, glaring at Amara. "You've brought these outsiders to our world." Admiral Zorn's holographic head swiveled toward the new arrivals. "Governor Silex," he said, the name sounding like a curse. "Your treachery is now laid bare before witnesses." Silex seemed to shrink under the Admiral's gaze, but quickly recovered his composure. "This is absurd. The specimen is clearly a native Draconian dragonling with a genetic defect. These outsiders are attempting to create a diplomatic incident with their preposterous claims." "The genetic signature of the royal line is unmistakable," Zorn countered. "As we speak, our ships have established a blockade around your world. No vessel will enter or leave until justice is served." Thorn stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Admiral, Governor, surely there's a peaceful way to resolve this situation. A genetic test could easily determine." "Silence, human," Silex snapped. "This is a Draconian matter now." He turned to his security team. "Seize the specimen and arrest these humans for conspiring with foreign powers." The security officers moved forward, weapons raised. Amara clutched Azure's carrier to her chest, backing away. Dr. Chun and Administrator Thorn positioned themselves protectively in front of her. "Governor Silex," Admiral Zorn's voice had turned deadly quiet. "I strongly advise against this course of action. My patience has limits." Silex hesitated, clearly weighing his options. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before a new voice joined the confrontation. "Perhaps I can offer a solution." All heads turned to see Mediator Patel entering the observation deck, flanked by 2 assistants carrying scientific equipment. Her calm demeanor seemed absurdly out of place amid the chaos. "Mediator," Thorn said, relief evident in his voice. "We were told you had left the planet." "Another convenient lie," Patel replied, casting a pointed look at Silex. "When I received word that my ruling was being ignored, I requested verification from the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. Imagine my surprise when I learned that the supposed High Council decision didn't exist." Silex's tail lashed angrily. "You overstep your authority, Mediator. In a planetary emergency, local governance supersedes diplomatic protocols. A self-declared emergency created to circumvent justice is no emergency at all," Patel countered. She gestured to her assistants, who began setting up their equipment. "I propose an immediate genetic analysis of the hatchling, with representatives from all parties present to verify the results." Admiral Zorn's holographic form nodded. "The Imperium agrees to this test, on the condition that Nurse Reeves remains with the hatchling at all times." Silex looked as if he might object, but a glance at the window, where the massive ships still loomed, seemed to temper his response. "Very well, but the testing will be conducted according to Draconian protocols, with oversight from neutral parties," Patel added firmly. What followed was a tense hour of scientific procedures. Amara stayed close to Azure, who submitted to the minimally invasive testing with remarkable patience. The hatchling seemed fascinated by Admiral Zorn's holographic presence, occasionally making those same complex vocalizations whenever the Admiral spoke. Finally, the results were processed. Mediator Patel examined the findings, her expression betraying nothing as she cross-referenced the data against multiple databases. "The genetic profile is conclusive," she announced. "The hatchling is not native to Draconia. Its DNA structure contains markers consistent with the sample provided by the Draconis Imperium, including several sequences unknown to our science." She looked directly at Silex. This is not a draconian dragon with a defect. It is, as claimed, a member of a different draconic species entirely. The room fell silent. Silex's scales had paled to an ashen gray. Furthermore, Patel continued, I am formally censuring the draconian government for attempting to circumvent a binding diplomatic ruling and for falsifying information to a mediator of the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. Admiral Zorn's massive holographic head inclined toward Amara. Nurse Reeves, on behalf of the Imperium and the royal family, I extend our deepest gratitude. Your compassion has preserved our future. We request that you accompany the royal hatchling back to the Imperium, where you will be honored appropriately. Amara looked down at Azurath, who gazed back with those intelligent eyes. She had grown attached to the little dragon, but the revelation of its true identity changed everything. This wasn't an abandoned creature in need of her care. It was the heir to an interstellar empire she hadn't even known existed. She began, uncertain how to respond. The human cannot leave with the specimen, Silex interjected, desperation evident in his voice. This entire situation has been a manipulation. These Imperium dragons clearly planted the egg here to create a pretext for invasion. Dr. Chen shook her head in disbelief. Why would an advanced civilization need such an elaborate ruse? They clearly have the military capability to take whatever they want. Because unlike some, Zorn said pointedly, the Imperium respects interspecies law and sovereignty. We did not come to invade, but to rescue one of our own. Mediator Patel turned to Amara. The decision is yours, Nurse Reeves. You have no legal obligation to accompany the hatchling. Amara looked at Azure again. The bond they had formed over these few days was undeniable. And yet, she was just a nurse from a small outpost, suddenly thrust into interstellar politics beyond her understanding. Will Azurath, be safe without me? She asked Zorn. The Admiral's expression softened. The transition would be easier with your presence, but we have royal caretakers trained for this purpose. The hatchling would survive. Survive, but perhaps not thrive, Amara murmured, remembering how Azure had responded to her voice, her touch. The decision crystallized in her mind. I'll go, at least temporarily, until Azurath is properly settled. A wise and compassionate choice, Zorn approved. We will make all necessary arrangements. Silex made one last desperate attempt. This is kidnapping. The human is a colonial citizen under draconian jurisdiction. Actually, Thorne interrupted, consulting his tablet. Nurse Reeves's contract includes a standard diplomatic clause allowing for temporary reassignment in cases of interspecies medical necessity. He looked up with a hint of satisfaction. Her paperwork is entirely in order. Governor Silex seemed to deflate, his earlier bluster evaporating as the full implications of his situation became clear. Not only had his deception been exposed, but he now faced the wrath of a previously unknown interstellar power whose technology clearly surpassed draconian capabilities. This isn't over, he hissed, backing toward the door. The full draconian military will stand down, came a new voice from the doorway. A tall, elegantly attired draconian entered, flanked by military officers wearing insignia different from Silex's security team. The newcomer's scales were a distinguished silver gray, and the ornate regalia suggested a position of significant authority. Premier Drax, Silex gasped, immediately lowering his head in deference. The Premier of Draconia surveyed the room with calculating eyes. Admiral Zorn, it has been many cycles since the Imperium honored us with its presence. Premier, Zorn acknowledged. I regret that our return comes under such circumstances. Drax nodded gravely. As do I. I have reviewed Mediator Patel's findings and the evidence against Governor Silex. His gaze shifted to the governor, who seemed to shrink further. Rest assured, the perpetrators of this crime against the royal hatchling will face appropriate justice. The Imperium accepts your assurance, Zorn said formally. With startling swiftness, Premier Drax signaled, and his military officers moved to surround Silex and his security team. Governor Silex, you are relieved of your authority pending a full investigation into charges of genetic tampering, diplomatic fraud, and attempted interspecies conflict instigation. As Silex was led away, protesting futilely, Drax approached Amara and Azure's carrier. For the first time, Uncertainty flickered across the Premier's reptilian features. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the carrier. Amara hesitated, then nodded, opening the carrier door. Azurath peered out curiously, studying the Premier with those intelligent eyes. Drax lowered himself to one knee, bowing his head. "Your Imperial Highness, on behalf of the Draconian people, I offer our deepest apologies for the crimes committed against you. We humbly request the opportunity to make amends." To everyone's surprise, Azurath emerged from the carrier and approached the Premier. The hatchling made a series of complex vocalizations, then gently touched its snout to Drax's lowered head, a gesture so formal and deliberate it couldn't possibly be instinctual. Admiral Zorn made a sound that might have been surprise or approval. It appears the royal hatchling is already displaying the diplomatic wisdom of its lineage. Drax rose, visibly moved by the interaction. The Draconian people welcome the opportunity to forge new ties with the Imperium. He turned to Amara. "And with humanity as well. Your actions, Nurse Reeves, may have prevented a terrible injustice from escalating into something far worse." Within hours, arrangements were made for Amara to accompany Azurath to the Imperial flagship. Dr. Chen helped her pack essential supplies and personal belongings, while Administrator Thorne handled the administrative details of her temporary reassignment. "Are you sure about this?" Dr. Chen asked as they prepared for departure. "You're stepping into an entirely unknown situation." Amara watched Azurath exploring its carrier, now modified to be more comfortable for longer transport. "Not entirely unknown," she said softly. "I know Azurath. Whatever else happens, I need to make sure the transition is smooth." Dr. Chen smiled. "Your compassion got you into this situation. I suppose it's fitting that it's also taking you forward." She handed Amara a data chip. "All our research on the hatchling. It might prove useful." The journey to the Imperial flagship was surreal. A diplomatic escort consisting of both Imperium and Draconian officials accompanied Amara and Azurath to a sleek transport vessel. As they rose through Draconia's atmosphere, Amara caught her last glimpse of Outpost 47, the small medical facility that had been her home for the past 3 years, now just a tiny dot on the landscape below. The flagship itself defied description. Massive beyond anything humans had ever constructed, its interior blended advanced technology with organic elements that seemed to grow and breathe. The crew consisted entirely of dragons similar to Admiral Zorn, true dragons of varying sizes and colors, moving with a grace that belied their massive forms. Amara was led to a spacious suite designed specifically for the royal hatchling, with accommodations modified for her human needs. Azurath immediately began exploring the new environment, seeming to recognize elements of the design despite never having been there before. "The royal memory runs deep," explained Talia, a female dragon assigned as Amara's liaison. Her scales were a pearlescent white, and she wore what appeared to be ceremonial jewelry around her neck and wings. Even newly hatched, the Imperial line carries ancestral knowledge in their genetic memory. "That explains so much," Amara said, watching Azurath investigate a pool of shimmering liquid at the center of the chamber. "The advanced vocalizations, the recognition of Admiral Zorn's ships." "Precisely," Talia confirmed. "Though we are surprised by the strength of the bond Azurath has formed with you. Such imprinting on a non-draconic caretaker is unprecedented." Over the days that followed, Amara worked closely with the Imperial caretakers, sharing her observations and helping Azurath adjust to its new reality. The hatchling continued to develop at an astonishing rate, its wing deformity already showing signs of self-correction under specialized treatment. A week after their arrival, Admiral Zorn requested Amara's presence in the Imperial Council chamber. Nervous but curious, she followed her escort through the ship's grand corridors, Azurath perched contentedly on her shoulder, a position the growing dragonling still preferred despite now being the size of a large dog. The council chamber took her breath away, a vast, circular space with a domed ceiling that somehow displayed the actual stars outside the ship. It was ringed with elevated platforms where massive dragons of various colors sat or perched. At the center was Admiral Zorn, his sapphire scales gleaming under the starlight. "Nurse Amara Reeves of Earth," he announced as she entered. "The Imperial Council welcomes you." Azurath chirped happily, launching from her shoulder to glide. its wings now strong enough for short flights, to a small platform near Zorn. The assembled dragons rumbled in approval at the display. The royal hatchling thrives under your care, Zorn continued. Our specialists confirmed that the wing damage is healing faster than anticipated, and Azurath's developmental markers exceed all projections. A russet-colored dragon leaned forward. We have reviewed your methods and notes, Nurse Reeves. Your intuitive approach to the hatchling's needs shows remarkable insight for one with no prior experience with our species. I just did what any medical professional would do, Amara said, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the attention of so many massive beings. I observed, adapted, and followed Azurath's cues. Precisely the wisdom our royal caretakers strive to embody, Zorn said with approval. Which brings us to the purpose of this gathering. The Imperial House has extended a formal request. Amara tensed, unsure what to expect. They asked that you consider accepting the position of Royal Guardian to Azurath, to continue as primary caretaker until the heir reaches adolescence. The request stunned her. But, I'm human. Surely there are more qualified candidates among your own people? Qualifications extend beyond species, said Talia, who Amara now realized held a position of significance on the council. Azurath has imprinted on you during a critical developmental period. The bond you share cannot be replicated. Furthermore, Zorn added, your actions have demonstrated precisely the qualities we value most in those who guide our future rulers: compassion, courage, and the wisdom to recognize value beyond physical perfection. Amara looked at Azurath, who was watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. The hatchling made a soft, encouraging sound. This would be a commitment of several years, Talia explained gently. You would be provided with everything needed to continue your medical studies, if you wish. And upon completion of your service, you would hold the rank of Imperial Friend, a position of honor that would open doors throughout known space. It was overwhelming, yet somehow felt right. From that first moment when she decided to save the abandoned egg, each step had led her here, to a place she never could have imagined, yet one where her skills and compassion were valued beyond measure. I accept, Amara said, her voice steady despite the emotions swelling within her. I will serve as Azurath's guardian for as long as needed. The council dragons rumbled their approval. Azurath launched into flight again, circling joyfully before landing on Amara's shoulder, nuzzling against her cheek. Later, as they returned to their quarters, Amara received a transmission from Dr. Chun at Outpost 47. The doctor's holographic form smiled broadly when it appeared. So, Imperial Guardian, she said, eyes twinkling. Quite a promotion from Outpost Nurse. Amara laughed. Hardly what I expected when I found that egg. The most important journeys often begin with the smallest acts of compassion, Dr. Chun said. The situation here has changed dramatically, by the way. Premier Drax has established formal diplomatic relations with the Imperium, and there's talk of a human embassy as well. She shook her head in amazement. All because you couldn't turn away from a creature in need. As they spoke, Azurath curled up in Amara's lap, already growing too large for the position but stubbornly maintaining the habit. The hatchling's damaged wing now extended almost normally, the specialized treatments accelerating the healing process. Governor Silex? Amara asked, facing multiple charges, including evidence that he was part of a separatist faction attempting to prevent Draconia from joining the wider galactic community. Dr. Chin's expression turned serious. The Imperium has been watching our region of space for decades, apparently. They were waiting for signs that we were ready for contact. And my saving Azurath was interpreted as such a sign. More than that, according to what we've learned, the Imperium values compassion as the hallmark of civilizational advancement. Your actions, and the subsequent support from Dr. Chun and myself, demonstrated that humanity possesses the qualities they consider essential for peaceful coexistence. The implications were staggering. A single act of kindness had not only saved a life, but had also opened the door to a vast, previously unknown civilization, one that might reshape humanity's future among the stars. Azurath stirred in Amara's lap, making a sound that she now recognized as contentment. The hatchling, the future ruler of the most powerful empire humans had ever encountered, trusted her completely. And she had earned that trust not through strength or cunning, but through the simple human quality of compassion. As Dr. Chin's hologram flickered out, Amara gazed through the viewport at the stars beyond. Her small act of defiance against those who would discard a life deemed imperfect had rippled outward, creating consequences no one could have predicted. Tomorrow, her formal training as Royal Guardian would begin, opening a new chapter in her life, and perhaps in the relationship between humanity and the wider universe. Azurath chirped softly, drawing her attention back to the present moment. Some journeys began with grand declarations or ambitious plans. Hers had started with a simple choice to care for a creature in need. As it turned out, that was the most profound beginning of all. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.